Thank you all for coming here. It's really quite an honor for this show, and I've been following Melissa's work for a little bit here, and in looking at past shows and what she's done, it's great to see sort of an evolution in an artist that is constantly changing, her subject, her style, and just as she grows as a person, she grows as an artist. I mean, Melissa's currently is a professor at the University of Colorado in Denver. She's also, I guess in her younger years, there were many artist residencies, including, Beijing, Mexico City, Ireland, Poland, Saratoga Springs, Wyoming, to be a few. But she's someone that's taken in sort of the environment around her and has kind of created her own voice with her work. And it's really an honor to have her here and to have her in the gallery. And well, enough from me. Here's Melissa Furness.
Hi. Well, first off, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for hosting my work in this beautiful, amazing space. It's been a joy to install the work and see it all come to fruition. Actually, this is the first time I've really seen this body of work on walls, which is a little bit strange, huh? Because the overarching idea of the work is this concept of the ruin. I did show some pieces previously, but they were actually installed in a way that was non-traditional, almost as structures. And so it was a little bit of a different way of viewing the work. So I really enjoy being able to present it differently in a different space. So I hope you don't mind. I have just little cue cards to make sure I don't meander off too far from my subject when I'm talking, explaining the work. Because there's a lot of really important, conceptual ideas and meanings that I do want to express to you and tell you about. So this idea of the ruin is not just about physical ruins that maybe you've gone to visit when you've traveled, but it's also about this ruins of a past in a way. And so with these works, you'll notice that some of them you might recognize little bits of historical paintings that you might have seen from, random art history class that you saw or went to, or something you saw somewhere. And so this exhibition is really more about this idea of the ruin or deconstruction of a history of Western art that is transforming and changing as we start to recognize those that are underrepresented, different cultures, and different places, and their significance, and sort of deconstructing that past in a new way. So just a little bit about my background. So these works are really a lot inspired by travel and by, Buck mentioned that I've done a lot of artist residencies. I actually come from small town Iowa, not so terribly far from here. It's been great to see some of my amazing family members here because they don't often get to see my work, so welcome everybody. And I went through and lived in small town, and then I went to undergrad, and my very first time actually traveling at all, even stepping foot on a plane, was when I was 21, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I then just went to Italy and met some people that I never had met before, and lived in Italy for 3 months and then London for 2 months. And it was such a transformative experience for me that it really changed my creative path in a major way. And from that point forward, I just really made every effort to get out in the world and to travel and to experience other cultures. One of my goals is to kind of purposefully not research or not know something about a place before I go. Usually you're a tourist, you want to know everything about everything and you want to go to the best places. But for me, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go, I'm not gonna know anything, I'm just gonna absorb and experience what these people and what this place has to offer to me. And I think that has really helped to inspire a lot of my creative ideas in a unique way that is maybe a little bit different than you might expect. So, you know, part of that interest in travel was that, you know, we're all Americans, right? Everything here is, I think, pretty new-ish, right? And so I was fascinated with these other cultures that have this long history and this long past, and interested in how the contemporary public lives amongst these ruins of the past and how they respond to it in a contemporary way. And so I too am taking these ideas of history in the past that I've learned and trying to transform them in this way, of my own way, I guess. So I have a particular connection to Italy because that was the first place I went to, but that place was so important to me and transformative to me that when I became a professor, it was very important to me to give that transformative experience to my students. And so it was really important to me to form my own study abroad program. And so I've been taking students, since 2010 to Florence, Italy to study and be inspired by that place and make art. So I can't even count the number of times I've been there, but you'll see, you know, obviously from around here that Italy has been a really great inspiration with the work here. And so along with that, some of the other places that have been really important to me, that have really made a difference to my work, are my observations of living as an artist in residency in Mexico City. In Denver, we have this event called the Biennial of the Americas, which it's fairly new. I think it's been starting probably the past 10 years or so, maybe more, but they did this special program where they did an artist residency exchange. They invited 2 artists from Mexico City and 2 artists from Denver. As a result of, I don't know, like it was kind of a pretty rigorous selection process. The public chose us and we did this whole interview process. And so I went and lived in Mexico City for 10 weeks, and 2 artists from Mexico City came and lived in Denver. And so when I was there, I found it fascinating to observe that culture by, you know, kind of feeling like I was a real resident. I actually did move out of my apartment. I put everything in storage. So I did feel like I was really living and moving there, even though it was kind of a shorter period of time. But having that experience of being amongst these people and trying to be part of them, even though I know very clearly that I was a foreigner at the same time. So what I was observing there were ruins that I would go and visit, like pyramids, things, and it turned into this whole idea of this piles of stuff. I noticed trash on the streets. I noticed the way that the government had kind of a lack of social services for the people. Like even the poorest people had to drink bottled water. I think it's probably some of the worst water in Mexico City that I've experienced. We all get sick. My daughter came with me. We went to the ER for a day. So it was just fascinating to study and be amongst these people and see how that would affect me with my work. So the other thing with that is that it was a complicated experience with the Biennial itself, where I've been aware of, you know, certain like power structures as well, and my own kind of like personal frustration with going down to Mexico City and everyone telling me that I couldn't paint there, that they were only making like conceptual performative work, and so I got a little frustrated, and I ended up making like 300 paintings in 2 months, and then turning them into a big pile of trash, like a ruin itself. So the paintings themselves became ruins, and I even invited people to step on them because I wanted to negate the preciousness of like this beautiful painting hung on a wall. And I also had this experience in China. Our university has a relationship with a university in China, China Agricultural University. So I taught there, but then I also got an artist residency in Beijing in a village. So it was a really striking experience for me to see the difference between what was presented to me when I was a professor versus what my living experience was as just a working artist. Very, very different. So, the part of the city that I was in as a professor, everything was very clean and very beautiful and very controlled. When I went as an artist, it was kind of like a main thoroughfare, but then all of a sudden you would turn a corner, go through gates, and it was a dirt road. People were sitting out on the street, piles of trash around, chickens around, and I had lived in an apartment, and I think there was different times when the electricity would go out or the water would go out, and so I was really struck by that, and I actually would walk by this one particular pile of trash every day to go to the metro. I started photographing the pile of trash because I thought it was like this crazy beast that became something, and so to me, I felt like the things that people discard and throw away were as telling of the culture as the things that they would uphold as important and significant. And so, to me, these beautiful paintings are the thing that people might uphold or show their power or their significance as a culture. And I wanted to transform that by extracting those elements from those paintings and putting them into a pile to show that repetition and turn them almost into something like a cliche, like a pile of trash or rubbish. Okay, drink of water. Huh?
8 months.
Oh yeah, so the pile from Mexico City, I didn't know what to do with 300 paintings. Like, what are you gonna do? Because you can't stack them in your studio forever. So I convinced this museum that was associated with the university to let me install them outside, as an actual ruin on site. And they stayed outside for 8 months. And I had a volunteer photograph them from the same vantage point every day. And they got snowed on them. And they got the fall weather and everything. So it was really interesting to see what happened. And then I have a book that was created that documents all of those paintings. And I was interested in what paintings still remained and which ones kind of disappeared or blew away or somebody stole, I don't know. Excuse me. So when I travel, I do kind of little side projects on purpose, sort of that pile. I also do other little side projects to help me to make art, but also get to know the culture at the same time. In China, related to the whole piles of stuff, there was the pile of trash, but also when I was observing things throughout the city when I was walking, they were kind of funny. Where they'd have some sort of construction project and be making a sidewalk, and they would be they would make these the bricks in the sidewalk, and they would make it perfectly, just enough for one person to walk down the street. But then they're like, oh, that's enough. And they left a pile of bricks on the side of the road and then abandoned the project. So I saw this over and over again, these projects that are sort of half done and half abandoned. And so I ended up starting stealing these bricks and stones from these places. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go with this idea of skipping stones, right? Because I was all the way across the ocean on the other side of the world. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to, I wrapped them in these sort of raw linen shrouds that I sort of painted, and then I was going to ship them by sea. And it was very important to ship them by sea, but then the Chinese really did not want me to ship them by sea. They're like, oh, you need to pay to fly them. And so I had these stones I was carrying from the taxi cab to the post office, and they're like, no, and then back to the taxi cab, back to the next place. And then I could not find them a place that would actually ship them by sea for me, so I left them there, and then I finally got somebody from the residency to ship them for me, and they arrived, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later at my front door, and one of them was missing, so. A little project. So, I don't know, it just felt like these little things that I do are sort of telling of the culture, gets me to be able to understand them and know them in a different way, while at the same time I'm making these other kind of paintings on the side, if that makes any sense. So getting back to the work, sorry, I was a little sidetracked there. I've taken these sort of repeated, visual symbols of the paintings of their time, as you can see with these, and extracted them from their original sources. And I wanted to deconstruct this idea of the canon of Western art. Those of you that might not have studied that Western art, these would be the canon would be those artworks that were considered very significant, painted by old masters, very important painters like Da Vinci. So, this whole idea of the canon really reflects a historical bias. It really favors art that's curated or created by those that have held a lot of power in society. So, many paintings are commissioned by those that are in power. So it really is a reflection of those that kind of have that. And I wanted to negate that in a way by extracting these elements from these paintings, putting them together amongst those that are kind of similar, like the portraits or like the fruit, and help you to kind of feel somewhat desensitized in terms of what that significant element was, and transforming it into a pile of stuff, a pile of trash, basically. And other things about that idea is like Giorgio Vasari, he wrote this significant history about the lives of the artists. That was also part of like kind of upholding that canon of Western art. And a lot of things were like misappropriated to the West, like the invention of oil painting, for instance. We all know that oil painting was done much earlier in a different part of the world. And so there are numerous things that are kind of incorrect in terms of like how they were identified by people in the past. So, these are paintings within paintings, basically. So the elements that I've extracted represent, those that, have the sense of opulence or beauty of the time period. So like if I wanted to describe one of them, each one of them has certainly little symbols and lots of different things in them that you can explore, which I hope that you will. So like the painting of the pomegranates and the melons over there, that's one of my more current ones that I just finished this past spring. So those are elements that are extracted from historical Dutch still life paintings. And the prosperous Dutch Golden Age was really fostered by the wealth that was reached from overseas trading and from colonial ventures. And it's interesting because the pomegranates were a symbol of fertility, and they were originally from Persia. And the cantaloupe was grown in the river valley of the Nile in Egypt. And that also kind of references certain aspects of female sexuality. And so I decided to pile, both the pomegranates and the cantaloupes together in order to kind of transform the meaning of maybe the original work into something that is more like just this pile of stuff. Fruit also has a certain significance in those Dutch still lives, representing this transient nature of our existence. And you'll see the appearance of certain food objects in Dutch still life paintings. So there are other paintings that I've created where you see different foods, like the lobsters back there as well, the bread. So the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch state really aggressively pursued their economic agendas overseas. And this brutal legacy of colonialism is still felt today. So I take these symbols and really throw them together in a pile so that they're no longer special. They lose their power, and over time they become something like a cliché. So if you've read some of the titles of the works, you'll notice there are little sayings that are fairly familiar, ones that are kind of repeated over and over that you've heard before. And so it's this idea of taking something that's repeated and ordinary and a little overused, and taking something that's like super like significant, like a painting or a historical painting, and doing that same thing with it. Let's see. And then in some of these works, you'll see references to like the Christian tradition. Renaissance paintings are definitely full of those. That was a time when the church held a lot of power and commissioned work, and it also had quite a bit of corruption. There was this historic struggle between virtue and vice. So within the work, I address both public and private narratives in a way. So there's little hidden elements. I think I've mentioned it to some of you where, I leave an odd element in that doesn't seem like quite part of the pile. And part of it is like, me having a little bit of fun and having some sense of humor in the work. Some people have mentioned the rabbit over here on this painting. My Chinese sign is the rabbit. So it's sort of me, kind of like a hidden nod of me in the work. I like how in that one as well, there's like, you know, maybe a hand that doesn't have a body that belongs to it, or a head with no rest of it. That these little things that you can discover as you're looking through the painting. The one with the portraits behind you, there's a kind of a hidden portrait of my daughter. There's also an image of Medusa, which references me when I was young. I was bullied in grade school, and their name for me was Medusa. So I kind of have a special connection to Medusa in a way. So, you know, there's a lot of fun. So hopefully you'll enjoy, you know, exploring those visual elements. And I think I'm also interested in how these historic paintings will reflect society in terms of, like, you know, those Dutch still lives. You know, that was really the start of an early form of capitalism where people were really, you know, interested in commodities and owning stuff and showing it off in a way. And so in thinking about that, as I was creating these works, you know, what are you going to do with the background, right? So there's the reference to pop art as well. So the backgrounds in them, they're all like soft gradients. Those are all done by airbrush. And there's also a difference in the sheen of the surface. The background is a dull quality, and the elements that are painted and modeled are going to have like a gloss glaze to them, which will make the color pop and move forward more so. And so, you know, if you think about like Andy Warhol, you know, you've seen like his screen prints that are repeated over and over again. It's kind of a nod to Andy Warhol in a way where, you know, instead of, you know, screen print of Marilyn Monroe, I have like a whole bunch of melons in a painting, right? Sort of desensitizes you, right, to what the original meaning of the work was. And so with capitalism and this idea of, I don't know, gluttony, the melon painting and the meat on the side here were part of a show called Serving Gluttony, which is really, you know, kind of addressing, you know, even what we've come to today in terms of society and like our attachment to stuff and what we consume. And so it's interesting, I think, to see that parallel between the past and the present, along with you know, these historical paintings and what they're referencing as well. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions, or if I've gone on too long.
I've got a quick one. I've been fascinated with how you use resin and how you use the various finishes on your work to kind of give it that sort of pop. I mean, can you give us any sort of insight into that, sort of on a technical side?
Well, I mean, the beaded painting is probably the most recent kind of large painting that I've made, and I was experimenting a bit with that, where I wanted to take something like, you know, the gross meat pie. It's really kind of seems like a disgusting sort of thing. And these and the insects I wanted to pop because, like, again, they're sort of like this creepy, crawly thing, right? But you're attracted to them, almost like jewels, right? The two paintings behind me, I admit, are a little bit different. I created this one during the pandemic while I was battling with my yard, and so I got really obsessive with painting weeds and patterns, and also, I don't know, like this maximalism, you know, that is related to these historical elements that I have included in the work. I mean, the patterns are all from, you know, William Morris kind of designs and patterns inspired from those, and combining that with my everyday life in a way. Wait, I didn't answer your question, did I? Okay. So there's the beads that have like the pop and the shine. I love how you like walk by and you kind of glitter, you catch the shine from the bugs. You see that too. The other ones aren't as apparent, but there is a gloss that makes those elements pop forward more. This one here on the floor also has gold leaf that I bought in Florence when I was there. And
there's actually a video installment that, do you want to
Yeah, so I collaborate with the professor who teaches sculpture at CU Denver, which is great. She and I have a lot of things in common because we both like to make big, heavy stuff, and then we haul it around the country together like Thelma and Louise. So she does giant cast metal elements like bronze, cast iron, and I make giant paintings. So we decided to join forces and make some installation work. So we've done a whole body of work together. And this is just one example of those. And there is a video element where I kind of borrowed/stole my daughter's trampoline and tossed objects onto it. Sorry about that. And so there's a moving element, like if it were in a dimmer area where you would see ordinary objects bouncing off this trampoline that also contains these historical objects.
I have a question. It's about the painting with the portraits.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the thousands and thousands and thousands of portraits painted, right, from who knows how many centuries back, how did you arrive at using these specific portraits and eliminating other ones?
I chose ones that are going to be found in like your thick art history books that you find in college, basically. Ones that are the most known. The icons, yes.
Would you say like Takashi Murakami has any influence on your work?
Well, I definitely know of his work. I think that I love his the way that he puts the eyeballs in there, and like his way of dealing with gender and flatness, right? And also he's very related to the pop art elements. So for sure, yeah.
The figurative one over here, like sort of the male structural on the figurative one and
The large figurative piece over here, I was very excited because it was kind of like my first really, really big painting, and it was kind of the first in this series, I believe it was, yes. And it was a little bit experimental, but I was really fascinated with the way that they distorted the human body, right? So looking at some of those Renaissance paintings, it's pretty clear that they're not natural. They're over-musculated, too much muscles, and also the models were often always male and not female, and they would just put some breasts on there and they would still look like males, and so you can tell. And also like the way that they're kind of all writhing and kind of blending together in a weird way. And so I really wanted to kind of point out those sort of strangenesses.
yeah. And Melissa will be around if you have any questions, and thank you all for coming. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.